What's up, guys? It is I. Recording in the morning, so my vocal cords are still not warmed up. I think in this video you might hear my voice gradually go up in pitch as the video progresses. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about Formidable's new Augment. I'm doing this right after Lexington just dropped yet another carrier with a root, but thankfully, Formidable never had a chance against light armor in the first place. Since she is forced to use 2 torpedo bombers, I initially assumed that she would only stand out against heavy armor when compared against her direct competition, which I would consider to be AvP, and AvP should output more damage against light and medium armor due to her loadout and barrage modifiers. Although looking at it now, AvP's loadout is really quite terrible, with 3 out of her 8 planes being taken up by low efficiency dive bombers. The unique Augment mostly increased her damage output, but also gave her extra reload, which she definitely needed. And it also increases the duration of her route by just a tiny bit, which is also very necessary. If you've used both Formidable and Implacable, you've probably noticed how much easier it is to time things to Implacable's route. Unfortunately, the proc chance of the route remains at 80% past the first airstrike, so she's still far from reliable, despite the fact that her whole role is to root the enemy to increase the consistency of your runs. The first thing I wanted to check was whether her damage output against heavy can even rival that of Implacable, because if she's not going to be as consistent, the only really niche she can occupy is to have higher damage. I didn't consider comparing them against medium or light armor because Implacable has a much more flexible loadout, and I don't think Formidable would have a chance against a double LA9 loadout or a HR plus Sky Raider loadout. I ran them together against Arizona Meta, who, by the way, has lower speed than Formidable, increasing her damage by 10% from the unique Augment effect. In terms of equipment, I gave them the same thing up to their first slot. Formidable requires 1 HMS plane to activate her plane efficiency buff, so I felt the best option was to give her a Fairy Firefly. We want to maximize torpedo bomber damage since we're facing a heavy armor boss. As for Implacable, the highest damaging option is actually LA9, but that would make Implacable's airstrike too slow, so it felt a bit unrealistic. She's used primarily to sync up her attacks with the other ships in the main fleet, so it makes more sense for her cooldown to be around the same as everyone else's. I did 5 runs, and only 5 because nothing misses and there's no RNG damage buffs, and the result actually surprised me, as Formidable consistently won out against Implacable, and this is without the flooding damage being reflected on the end screen. The raw footage will be linked in the description, by the way. We do need to take into account that Implacable reduces the evasion stat of the boss by 10%, but Arizona's evasion isn't that high to begin with, so her damage output is lower than Formidable's, even if we adjust for that bias. From this result, we can also infer that her damage against heavy is likely higher than that of even Arc Royals for an average number of Arc Royals double damage procs, since in the past, I found Arc Royals damage to be around the same as Implacable's when it comes to heavy armor. Since she impressed me so much with this performance, I thought, might as well compare her to AvP as well, this time against Arc Royal Meta, who is a medium armor boss, also with lower speed than Formidable. This time, I had to use the Spearfish in her third slot to give her an HMS plane to activate the efficiency buff, as it's crucial to use LA9 against medium armor. But I will acknowledge that it might be possible that she would deal more damage without that buff if she used an AIM torpedo bomber in the third slot instead. By the way, Arc Royal Meta sends planes at the backline, and I think there was one run where Formidable was revealed by the planes at some point, so I discarded the result from that run. Also, somewhere within the runs, I wasn't paying full attention, and I think I started an Arizona Meta by accident, and of course did not count that in the result. After the 5 runs, she appears to have dealt more damage than AvP on average, but after accounting for the 8% aviation damage taken debuff that AvP applies, she actually dealt a little bit less. The margin here is quite close though, and the total damage contribution of AvP is probably higher with her aviation damage debuff for your other carriers, plus the fact that she doesn't have a 20% chance to fail to proc her root past the first airstrike, makes her the better choice against medium armor in the end, especially if it's against a heavy cruiser instead of a carrier, against which she deals 20% more damage. However, Formidable's personal damage did definitely receive a much needed glow up. In some sick twist of fate, the first carrier to have a root in her kit is now the least consistent wielder of it, but among the highest damaging. Looking at my carrier tier list, I think it's reasonable to put her at least above Arc Royal, having a full root instead of a slow, and higher damage output on average. But she's not too much better since there's still a decent chance for her root to not activate when you're relying on it. I had AvP below Arc Royal in the first place, only because I think carriers are relatively easier to use against heavy armor than battleships. And since Formidable also excels against heavy armor, this ordering still makes sense to me. I'm actually going to put her above Shokaku as well, mostly because Hakuho got added, so there's even more competition for Shokaku now. I think Centaur still has the niche of being extremely fast, so I'll keep her as the highest A ranking ship for now. Okay, and that's pretty much it for Formidable's Augment. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.